On Africa 24 English, the African Union Journal is presented to you by Afreximbank. Welcome to all of you. Welcome back to another edition of the African Union Journal. This week, we take a look at the 2026 budget adopted by the African Union to strengthen the continent's growth and resilience. To do so, we take a look at the new 12.7% increase in states' contributions and the acceleration of Africa's transformation through restorative justice. Reports and analysis to follow in a moment. In Malabo, Equatorial Guinea, the foreign ministers of the member states of the African Union have met for the 47th ordinary session of the Executive Council. The meeting focused on the challenges of restorative justice for Africans, as well as strategic issues such as the financing of the organization's 2026 budget. While some progress has been made, notably a slight increase in the rate of contribution to the program budget, the African Union is warning about the poor implementation of the input tax agreed in Kigali in 2016. Maria Roger-Kwao reports.
In Malabo, Equatorial Guinea, at the 47th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union was held on July 10 and 11, 2025. During this meeting, the foreign ministers of the member states discussed a theme with a strong historical and political resonance: justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. This initiative was spearheaded by the African Union Commission as the continent seeks to strengthen its autonomy and make its voice heard on the international stage. The focus was also on the institution's financing. The 2026 budget is expected to be finalized at the end of this meeting. This session of the Executive Council will examine the Union's budget for 2026. The PRC report submitted for your consideration highlights the progress in financing the program budget. It increased from 9.4% in 2025 to 12.7% in 2026. The program budget remains more than 77% funded by international partners. The member states of the Union finance 100% of the operating budget. Other key topics discussed included accelerating the continent's integration process, the distribution of roles between the African Union, regional economic communities and member states, and the progress of the EFCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area. These discussions are part of a shared desire to revitalize Agenda 2063 by placing regional cooperation and the harmonization of economic policies at the heart of priorities.
As Africa's most transformative economic initiative since the founding of the OAU, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area has the potential to restructure African economies. By 2045, the AFCFTA is projected to boost intra-Africa trade by 45%, while driving sectoral growth, including 60% of agri-food, 48% in industry, 34% in services, and 28% in energy and mining. But we must ensure that this trade agreement does not remain on paper.
Financing the African Union, however, remains a central challenge. The Commission announced a slight increase in member states' contribution to the program budget, from 9.4% to 12.7% between 2025 and 2026. However, only 17 countries have so far implemented the 0.2% import tax decided in Kigali, Rwanda in 2016 to ensure the institution's financial autonomy. This is a recurring concern, as Pan-African ambitions require stable and sustainable resources. The Commission continues its effort to mobilize resources. As you know, the United States still refuses to apply Resolution 2719 to Somalia. We will still have to rely on the Peace Fund, whose primary vocation is to support peace operations on our continent. In an uncertain global context, the African Union Commission therefore intends to maintain the course of sovereign, ambitious development driven by Africans themselves.
In Africa, the transformation of the multilateral financial architecture and the slow progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals remain a real challenge. Through its Agenda 2063, the African Union is proposing to focus on regional integration, strategic development, and building resilience to current and future challenges. This involves diversifying economies, modernizing infrastructure, investing in renewable energy, and promoting economic and trade policies. Find out more from Nana Kamsukom.
Africa is one of the world's fastest growing economies, but meeting the demand for key infrastructure at all levels remains a priority. According to the World Bank, sub-Saharan Africa is home to over 1 billion people, more than 50% of whom will be under the age of 25 by 2050. The continent is rich in human and natural resources and represents a market of 1.2 billion people, as well as the world's largest free trade area. But to make the most of these opportunities and tackle challenges such as poverty and inequality, Africa needs to invest in infrastructure.
Let's accelerate the Africa Continental Free Trade Area implementation. As Africa's most transformative economic initiative since the founding of the OAU, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area has the potential to restructure African economies. By 2045, the AFCFTA is projected to boost intra-Africa trade by 45%, while driving sectoral growth.
Infrastructure investment can play an important role in the continent's recovery, creating jobs, boosting productivity, and supporting inclusive growth. In terms of accelerating climate action, the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, led by the African Development Bank and the Global Center on Adaptation, aims to mobilize $25 billion over 5 years to accelerate and scale up climate adaptation measures on the continent.
The challenge before us is implementation, and that includes aligning policies, reducing barriers, and investing in productive capacity.
According to the EU Executive Council, African countries have not yet achieved their development goals, but the new Sustainable Development Goals are perfectly in line with the continent's priorities for the next 15 years led by Agenda 2063. It is important for the continent to embark on a new development trajectory conducive to this structural transformation in order to improve productivity in line with the rise of industrialization, which requires massive investment in human capital as well as the development of new technologies.
For the proper functioning of the new structures that have been put in place is the SATAR reform. I believe that this reform of staff placement in the new structures that have been set up following the reforms that were hampered, notably the Space Agency, the Humanitarian Agency, or the African Union Medicines. All these agencies need staff.
It is important to develop resilience strategies that are adapted to local contexts, taking into account the specific challenges and needs of each region and community. According to the former president of the African Development Bank, creating sustainable livelihoods, particularly in the agricultural sectors, is crucial for community resilience and poverty reduction in Africa.
For centuries, the people of Africa and their diasporas have borne the brunt of significant historical injustices: the transatlantic slave trade, colonial exploitation, resource grabbing, and marginalization in the global economic architecture. In response, the African Union is stepping up its call for restorative justice, urging the international community to confront and remedy the economic legacy of slavery and colonialism. A report by Catherine Gombe. The African Union has placed restorative justice at the heart of its priorities for 2025, with the theme of the year being Justice for Africans and People of African Descent through Reparations. The strategic direction reflects the growing mobilization on the continent through civil society and the diaspora to demand tangible reparations for slavery, colonization, and economic dispossessions.
Civil society is at the center of this. We are not on the sidelines. We are not begging for the space. We are the ones driving the change our continent needs so that we truly realize the motto of the African Union, which says, the Africa we want.
From July 7th to 9, 2025 in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea, the AU Civil Society Forum organized by ECOSOC made a strong appeal to put an end to historical impunity and to obtain concrete compensation. This demand follows on from the Accra Summit in 2023, where Kenyan President Nana Akufo-Addo called on African leaders to unite in demanding justice.
I think it is quite important that we should not see the financial part of it more than we should see the justice part of it. Africa and the African people have been going through injustice for a very, very long time. We are not represented in the Security Council of the UN as permanent figures. We are not represented in many of the committees of the United Nations as we're supposed to be. So that is also another dimension that we need to really deliberate on and discuss. How Africa can be actively and effectively participating in all UN entities, including the Security Council of the UN.
Figures speak for themselves. A report published in 2023 by international experts, including International Court of Justice Judge Patrick Robinson, estimates that the UK would have to pay more than $24 billion to 14 African nations. Other estimates put the total cost of colonial and slave reparations at over $100,000 billion. In the United States alone, the forced labor of Afro-descendants represents a moral and economic debt estimated at $40,000 billion.
Africa should fully embrace the principles of just transition in ways that work for our context and for our people. I repeat, for our own context and for our people. Friends, colleagues, as this forum closes, our work is only beginning. What we have discussed here must now return with us to our organizations, our constituencies, our communities, and our countries. These conversations need to continue, but more importantly, they need to lead to concrete.
Faced with the slowness of the former colonial powers, African voices such as Dominiki and Timba are calling for a coordinated Pan-African strategy. The aim is to set up a continental mechanism to influence international negotiations and guarantee reparations tailored to African reality. This week's Regional News by Paul Marcel Mayagi looks at topics such as the call for human dignity made on African Anti-Corruption Day 2025, action to meet the energy and water challenges faced in the SADC region, and finally on the reduction of trade losses by SMEs of up 15% through road fluidity in the ECOWAS zone.
On the occasion of the Africa Anti-Corruption Day, on the 11th of July 2025, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, chairperson of the African Union Commission, urged member states to integrate human dignity into their anti-corruption strategies. Under the theme promoting human dignity in the fight against corruption, he stressed that corruption is not only an economic crime but also a denial of fundamental rights, particularly affecting the most vulnerable. In Africa, corruption robs the continent of nearly $50 billion a year, or around 5% of the region's GDP. Mahmoud Ali Yusuf reiterated the importance of the AU Convention on Combating Corruption, calling for immediate action to strengthen integrity and transparency on the continent. From the 30th of June to the 4th of July 2025, SADC energy and water ministers met in Array to accelerate energy reforms and strengthen water security in the region. The event was marked by discussions on key projects such as the Grand Inga, the Congo water transfer, and clean cooking initiatives. Although progress has been made, an energy deficit of over 4,000 megawatts persists, mainly due to the El Nino-related droughts and obsolete infrastructure. The ministers urged countries to ratify the amended energy protocol quickly and to step up production projects. In the water sector, cross-border projects such as the development of the Songwe River Basin and the supply of water to the Lesotho Highlands have made significant progress. In conclusion, the leaders reaffirmed their commitment to accelerating regional integration and seeking innovative solutions for a more resilient energy and water future. 50 years after its creation, ECOWAS continues to fight for the free movement of goods and people. According to the World Bank, around 40% of traders report informal practices and blockage at borders, slowing down trade. On the 10th and 11th of July 2025 in Lomé, Togo, More than 50 players in cross-border trade recently attended a training course on the rules of the free trade scheme. Mochoso Justin Machitoma, permanent secretary of OATA, stressed the importance of mastering the legislative text to overcome these obstacles. The Fluidity on the Road initiative, which aims to simplify procedures for small businesses and women, could help reduce losses of up to 15% of traders' turnover. By overcoming these challenges, ECOWAS could finally achieve this regional economic integration.
On July 9, 2025, U.S. President Donald Trump received the heads of state of Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania, and Senegal at the White House. The meeting focused primarily on prospects for trade cooperation. It took place against the backdrop of redefined economic priorities, 2 days after the U.S. President announced on July 7th the introduction of a 30% customs surcharge of imports from several African countries, with effects from August 1st, 2025. Pauline Minka reviews these events.
On July 9, 2025, U.S. President Donald Trump welcomed the leaders of 5 African countries, namely Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, Liberia, Mauritania, and Senegal, to the White House. The aim of the meeting was to discuss trade prospects between Washington and its African partners against the backdrop of a trade war that is likely to weaken developing economies that are heavily dependent on trade with the United States.
Mr. President, we thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here. Liberia is a long-standing friend of the United States, and we believe in your policies to make America great again. We are also very attached to your diplomacy in terms of economic development and trade friendship. We would like to thank you warmly for this opportunity.
In 2024, trade between Africa and the United States reached significant levels. African countries exported $39.5 billion worth of goods to the U.S., while the U.S. sent $32.1 billion worth of goods to Africa. This represents an increase of 11.9% or $3.4 billion compared to 2023. On July 7, 2025, the United States announced the introduction of new customs duties, including the 30% surtax on certain products imported from Africa from August 1, 2025.
It's time for Gabon to move towards local processing of its resources: manganese, 12 million tons a year, iron, lithium, cobalt, and gold, in order to create jobs, increase added value, and meet national energy demand estimated at 9 gigawatts.
For Washington, Africa represents great economic potential with its wealth of minerals and oil reserves, which explains the United States' desire to strengthen its presence on the continent.
My administration is committed to strengthening our friendships in Africa through economic development efforts that benefit both the United States and our partners.
The meeting, which took place against the backdrop of a review of U.S. domestic and international priorities under President Trump, comes just days after the official dismantling of USAID, the international development agency that provided support to many African countries.
The Central African Economic Forum will be held from the 23rd to the 25th of July 2025 in Yaoundé, Cameroon. Under the theme Investment and SME Financing in Central Africa, this regional and international event will bring together political, economic, and financial players to discuss financing and regional integration opportunities. The third edition will focus on the development of SMEs and the industrialization of regional value chains in a continental context conducive to innovation and cooperation. From the 16th to the 19th of September 2025, the headquarters of the African Union Commission in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, will be the venue for the 5th Pan-African Post-Harvest Congress and Exhibition. This major event will bring together decision makers, industrialists, researchers, and players in the agricultural sector around the critical issues of post-harvest management and food security. Organized as a showcase for the continent's innovations, the Congress offers companies and organizations the opportunity to present their products, technologies, and services to a strategic audience from Africa and beyond. On October 23 and 24, 2025, heads of state, investors and development institutions will meet in Angola to unlock major funding for the continent's roads, electricity grids, ports and digital infrastructure. At the initiative of the African Union and under the impetus of President João Lourenço, the event aims to address a deficit estimated at over $100 billion a year. The summit aims to unlock the financing needed to build a single electricity market by 2040 through initiatives such as PIDA and the CMP.
On a continent where legal frameworks often lag behind political ambitions, Hajer GUELDICH is charting a new course defined by precision, principles and Pan-African objectives. More than a jurist, Hajer GUELDICH has become a defining force in Africa's pursuit of a unified legal order, one that elevates the rule of law, strengthens institutions and assets the continent's voice on the world stage. Sarah Yemili provides her for us.
As President of the African Union Commission on International Law, Hajer GUELDICH is a professional at the service of the continent's legal community. A distinguished jurist, she holds a doctorate in public law from Carthage University, where she shaped minds and institutions. In 2019, she launched an innovative master's program in African Union Law and Policy, the first of its kind in the region. She also heads the University Research Laboratory dedicated to international law and cooperative constitutional studies, making her a driving force in advancing legal research across the continent.
For far too long, the narrative surrounding Africa and international law was one of passive acceptance. This is a result of the systemic erasure of African states from the history of the creation and use of international law, and Africa not receiving credit for contributing to the making of international law in the post-colonial era. In reality, African states emerging from colonialism actively challenged the Eurocentric foundations of international law. Today, Africa has been pioneering a unique approach to climate change law. African legal frameworks, both at the national and regional level, prioritize the adaptation of strategies due to the continent's unique vulnerability.
The Tunisian Hajer GUELDICH has become a leading force in shaping Africa's legal architecture. First elected to the African Union Commission on International Law in 2015 and re-elected in 2018, she made history in 2022 as its first female president. As legal counsel to the EU, she has become an advocate for rule-based integration, most notably representing the Union and 52 member states before the International Court of Justice in 2024 in support of Palestine.
These legal frameworks, deeply rooted in community, equity, and intergenerational justice, address the specific needs of African nations.
Under Hajer GUELDICH's stewardship, the African Union Commission on International Law has become a driving force for legal innovation and reform in Africa. Her work has become instrumental in shaping the African Union's legal framework, promoting the rule of law and advancing international cooperation. She has demonstrated a commitment to empowering African voices in global legal discourse, nurturing a new generation of legal experts, and tackling the continent's complex challenges.
Nous avons fait l'état des lieux des instruments.
We have taken stock of the instruments. What has not yet been ratified to encourage states to do so? We highlighted the role of education, civil society, associations, women and young people. We have also highlighted solutions and recommendations for moving forward.
Pas seulement que les défis, mais surtout les solutions, les recommandations, comment aller de l'avant.
Hajer GUELDICH's role as President of the African Union Commission on International Law underscores her expertise and leadership in shaping the continent's legal landscape. Her work continues to impact the development of international law in Africa.
Thank you for following this edition of the African Union prepared by the entire editorial team. Find all the African news on our website, africa24tv.com, and on the app, MyAfrica24. On Africa 24 English, The African Union Journal is presented to you by Afreximbank.